Stop whatever you're doing and take a breath, because the House of Windsor has just slipped into uncharted waters. One leaked medical whisper, one late-night courtyard argument, and one draft bill marked eyes only have collided to produce the most volatile royal cocktail since the week Harry packed his bags for Montecito. At the center of this storm stands a monarch whose reign is barely out of its infancy, and whose health is suddenly the subject of feverish speculation. The result? A legislative gamble so daring, and, some say, so reckless, that even seasoned courtiers are whispering, "We have never seen anything like this." Let's rewind to the moment the fuse was lit. A Tuesday dawned in London with drizzly indifference, yet by mid-morning the entire palace switchboard was alight. The Daily Telegraph had splashed a front-page headline no one expected to read this side of a coronation anniversary. "King weighs radical crown reform," it blared. Beneath the banner, a subheading even more incendiary, "Confidential bill would hand day-to-day duties to Prince William and enshrine new rules of succession." Within minutes the phones of every royal correspondent in Britain were buzzing like agitated hornets. The whispers were so extraordinary they felt like fiction. Charles, only just past the first chapter of his reign, would lighten the constitutional weight pressing on his own shoulders by codifying a permanent, quasi-regent role for his heir. The catch? He would remain king in name, in prayer, and in history, while William would effectively steer the ship of state in everything except name. No monarch has attempted anything so audacious since Edward VIII decided that love trumped crown. But why? Why now? Why risk the optics of abdication without actually abdicating? Those questions warrant a torchlight exploration through the labyrinth of palace corridors, where health concerns, family warfare, and personal legacy converge, each thread twisting tighter until it strangles tradition. First, the health rumors. Though Buckingham Palace insists Charles's cancer treatments are progressing satisfactorily, seasoned watchers detect an unmistakable shift. The hollowed cheeks, the slight stoop, the shepherd's crook that appeared in official portraits, these are not mere style statements. They are flashing amber lights. When the monarchs write, "I turned bloodshot" at a Windsor reception, the press office pinned it on a burst vessel. Yet among palace staff the private whispers were less sanguine. The king is tired, the king is in pain, and the king does not want the public to see him falter. Enter Jerson Therapy, a fringe medical regimen that requires coffee enemas by sunrise, and an hourly regimen of vegetable juices that would make the most devout nutritionist blanch. For decades the British medical establishment has treated Jerson with equal parts derision and alarm, yet to Charles, ever the curious gardener of alternative remedies, it offers hope. Hope of strength, hope of regained focus, hope of time. Still, top oncologists inside the household have reportedly filed memoranda warning of electrolyte imbalances, kidney risks, and significant scientific uncertainty. The king, according to multiple sources, simply thanked them for their service and carried on with his carrot apple ginger regimen undeterred. Second, the family fissures. Harry's memoir, Spare, turned private pain into a lucrative paperback. William, obliged to smile through the coronation, yet privately livid about being cast as the villainous brother, has refused every olive branch. Courtiers speak of the Prince of Wales's glacial demeanor any time Harry's name is uttered. One aide recalled watching William Page through a briefing on youth homelessness, until a note referencing Harry's foundation work appeared. The heir closed the folder, asked for a new draft, and said 3 words, "Cut that section." That is the depth of the chill. And Catherine, herself recovering from her own frightening ordeal, is said to believe that trusting Harry again would be naive in the extreme. The Wales household is thus a fortress. The Sussexes, by contrast, are a broadcast studio in perpetual production mode, ready with a new podcast, docuseries, or primetime confession whenever the spotlight dims. Against this backdrop stands Charles, the father who longs to mend fences yet shoulders a crown that demands impartiality. Every time he considers inviting Harry for tea at Highgrove, private secretaries remind him of Oprah's questions, of Anderson Cooper's tape deck, of the ghostwriter Martin splicing audio clips for the next edition. Love your son, they advise, but protect the silence of the sovereign. Torn, the king seeks a solution that will grant him peace, both personal and constitutional. And so, according to leaks as credible as they are jaw-dropping, palace lawyers have drafted a bill, code-named Project Golden Willow, that would allow a reigning monarch suffering serious or chronic health constraints to delegate almost every daily prerogative to the Prince of Wales, while retaining the throne. William would chair Privy Council meetings, sign certain orders, travel in Charles's stead, and appear at major state functions as Prince Regent, though not styled so, to avoid the ghost of George IV. Meanwhile, the king would devote his limited energies to big-picture passions, climate diplomacy, interfaith dialogue, Commonwealth renewal, and, most poignantly, reconciliation with his younger son. It is constitutional jiu-jitsu. Abdicate the workload, keep the crown, and buy precious months or years for a private legacy project. Of course, any bill altering the Regency Acts must glide through Parliament, where Republicans sniff an opportunity and traditionalists bristle at change. Tory backbenchers fear an erosion of monarchical majesty, while Labour's left-wing eyes an opening for broader modernisation. Yet the Prime Minister, still basking in the glow of a surprise Sandringham summit with the King on youth opportunity, appears game. He knows that a constitutional compromise now could spare the nation a destabilising abdication later. Then there is Camilla, the Queen who spent decades climbing from tabloid pariah to national grandma. Courtiers insist she supports whatever eases her husband's burden, yet critics suspect she fears a prolonged regency, in which William's popularity eclipses her own. One senior family friend confided, "Hermione is pragmatic, yes, but she also knows that once William becomes the public face of kingship, the press's adoration may never swing back." And so, every stakeholder plays a high-stakes waiting game. William measures each public smile, each hospital visit, each overseas speech as potential rehearsal for a quasi-kingly role. Harry weighs the cost of silence against the temptation of another confessional exclusive, knowing one wrong sentence could torpedo any chance of a bedside truce. Charles drinks his green juice, submits to another coffee infusion, and pores over speech drafts for a legacy policy on climate reparations. Camilla counts engagements, steadies shaking hands, and prays that her husband's next eye blotch does not trend on TikTok. Meanwhile, the country, equal parts fascinated and fatigued by royal sagas, wonders whether its monarch can truly govern by proxy while fighting for his life. Constitutional scholars dust off tomes on Victoria's twilight years, on George III's fading faculties, on the pragmatism that once allowed a regent to sign bills yet still address his father as Your Majesty. They note that no reign in modern times has introduced a voluntary workload delegation absent mental incapacity. If Golden Willow passes, Charles will pioneer a new model, a crown that recognizes mortal limits in real time rather than in hindsight. Critics howl that the king should abdicate outright if he cannot fulfill every duty. Monarchists retort that a symbolic crown is as valuable as a working one, and that experience should not be thrown aside while it can still guide. A tension older than the Magna Carta resurfaces. Where does sacred anointing end and practical governance begin? Through all this, one fact remains immovable. The world will judge Charles's reign not by the number of red boxes he signs, but by the grace with which he navigates terminal challenges, familial fracture, and a public hungry for authenticity. If Golden Willow becomes law, historians may hail it as compassionate modernization, or condemn it as the day the monarchy admitted it cannot do everything tradition demands. If it dies in committee, Charles faces two stark paths: struggle on until nature intervenes, or follow Edward VIII into abdication, and reignite a crisis no royal watcher wishes to imagine. Behind palace gates, the clock ticks. The television cameras are already primed for sudden announcements. Cabinet ministers murmur contingency